I'm Ben Data, CEO of Food Maven and a Denver Startup Week co-founder. Denver Startup Week has always been about community. And today, it's more important than ever to show how we can come together to create opportunities out of the challenges that we face. Opportunities for every member of the community. Before we dive in, we want to say a special thank you to our 2020 Denver Startup Week sponsors who make it all possible. Thanks to our title sponsors, Downtown Denver Partnership, JP Morgan Chase, Prologis, and Xero. And our track sponsors who have made all the great content you're hearing today possible. Battery 621 and the Public Works, Capital One Cafe, Colorado Lending Source, Friday Health, Quizlet, Exactly, Zayo, and Zestful. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to Wix, Kenzen, MAPR Agency, Obsidian HR, Kickstart Fund, Promontory Mortgage, Molson Coors, and Comcast. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Thank you for your support at Denver Startup Week. You help make all of this possible.
At Zayo, our fiber fuels global innovation. Everything we do, everything we can imagine. Never in history has innovation happened at such a rapid pace. And all of it depends on bandwidth connectivity. Millions of miles of Zayo's fiber span the globe, traveling unique routes, providing dense metro footprints, offering next-generation solutions. We didn't just see the future of fiber, we built it. We delivered it. Every millisecond, our fiber is fueling crucial operations, breakthroughs, and innovations for the world's most impactful companies. Companies that are disrupting the status quo, igniting imaginations, revolutionizing industries, and creating brand new ones. Our customers are advancing wireless communication, transforming healthcare, changing education, revolutionizing transportation, redefining banking, powering retail, and upping the game in esports. These innovators rely on Zayo's fast, secure fiber networks to connect their offices, factories, data centers, clouds, exchanges, venues, and more, ultimately fueling innovation and transforming lives. And behind those fiber connections, Zayo is all about human connections. We take ownership in all we do. Our employees take the initiative to deliver trusted solutions to every customer and make their experience effortless. We are energetic and entrepreneurial, a partner to rely on. We are Zayo. We are working with our customers on what comes next, constantly anticipating what can be. We are fueling global innovation that is changing the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm John Wilker with 360 Conferences. I'm the Spotlight and Headline Events track chair and a member of the organizing committee. Thank you for joining us for our first ever virtual Denver Startup Week. And this session, Energize Colorado, helping prepare small businesses for the new economy. If 2020 has taught us anything, it's that we are more powerful when we come together as a community to share ideas and help make each other better. And here we are, virtually showing the world what Denver is made of. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There's something for everyone at DSW. Thanks for joining us. And again, thank you to Zayo. They're an outstanding partner of Denver Startup Week, and this would not be possible without them. And with that, I will hand it over to Wendy to get you all started.
Okay, thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone, and to our motley crew here. It's exciting to spend the next hour with you. I want to congratulate Denver Startup Week. I mean, 8 years, amazing success, a stellar 2 days, and again, speakers from inside and outside the state. And I hope this panel will deliver some insights and some energy and inspiration around what Energized Colorado is doing for the small business sector across the state. My name is Wendy Lea. I'm an ecosystem builder. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have the good fortune to facilitate this panel this afternoon, which will be a load of fun. I love doing it, and I'm honored to be here. So just a thumbnail about Energized Colorado before we dig in. We were established in late March in response to a complex, gnarly set of crises: public health, economic problems, mental health, and racial inequality. Our state, like the United States, had to respond to as a result of COVID. Energized Colorado, statewide, volunteer-led, dedicated to building a resilient, innovative, small business ecosystem that serves all Coloradans across racial and economic divides. We are Coloradans helping Coloradans. So for the rest of our time today, we're going to have 3 sections. Most of us with monkey minds have a challenge focusing. So just imagine 3 parts of the agenda. Number 1, some quick intros. I'm going to lead the big picture intros of each person very quickly. And then I'm going to go to you guys to talk about why you engaged with Energized Colorado and what your roles are, just for context for the audience. Then we're going to go to a little bit of the value we're delivering from your perspectives and how the heck we're delivering these initiatives and these programs with volunteers. So get ready for that. You saw that in the agenda earlier. And then the third section is the juicy section. We really want to dig into our view of the small business economy in Colorado and what we can do to make sure we're building resilience and inclusivity for the next economy. So that's the flow. Any questions? You guys are good with that? Yes? We haven't practiced, so thumbs up would be good for me. Okay, let me dig into a couple of the big picture intros, although I'm sure everyone mostly knows everyone, but just in case, it's always fun to do this. So Brad Feld, Managing Director, Foundry Group, co-founder of Techstars, author of 7, I said 12 books a couple of weeks ago. That was incorrect, only 7. And our fearless leader here at Energize Colorado. Danielle Shoots, what an honor to have you today. Founder and CEO of the Daily Boss Up. I like that name very much. It's a digital leadership and life coaching platform that brings daily inspiration directly to cell phones. 2017 Denver Business Journal 40 Under 40, 2019 Women's Chamber Top 25 Most Powerful Women in Business, and 2020 National Emerging Leader in Philanthropy from the Association for Black Foundation Executives. Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Marc Nager. And it's weird that I've not met any of you, but I feel like I know you so well. I always think that, and I have to say it. So Marc is the fund director for Greater Colorado Venture Fund, co-founder of Startup Weekend, Up Global, ran startup weekends around the world. That organization merged with Techstars, now runs a venture fund explicitly investing in rural Colorado. Again, the Greater Colorado Venture Fund. Welcome, Marc. Erik Mitisek, our own Erik Mitisek, yay, president of High Wing, co-founder of Denver Startup Week, also served on Governor Hickenlooper's as Governor Hickenlooper's Chief Innovation Officer, founding director of DU's X-Site, and I heard that was awesome, the panel yesterday, and just involved in a wide range of things and a very important contributor to Energize Colorado. So that's you guys, pretty impressive crowd. Now, let's start, Brad, let's start with you because it was your outreach that got many of us involved. So maybe your story, origin story with us and your role now with Energize Colorado.
Sure. Early in March, the week of March 11th, when the COVID crisis started to amplify in a meaningful way in Colorado, I got involved in a couple of things right away that were sort of crossover public-private partnership activity. One of them was something that became the Innovation Response Team, which Sarah Thunberg now works for the state of Colorado, ran. We ran that through the end of June, and that got absorbed into Colorado Department of Public Health, where Sarah is now responsible for all containment testing. So that was like a set of activities. And then another set of activities was the governor's, I never get the name right, the governor's Emergency Economic Stabilization and Growth Council. Did I do that? I got that right. So that new council was rolled up to OEDIT and Betsy Markey. Federico Pena chaired it, and I led one of the 7 different committees. And the committee I led initially was titled Small Business, and I decided I wanted the longest committee name, so I changed it to something like Local, Rural, Entrepreneurship, Women and Minority-led Business, and contingent workforce or something like that. So it didn't fit on one line on the website. But it was essentially focused on businesses 500 people or less. So in a very short period of time, a couple of days, about half of my work life shifted to all of this activity. And when I say half of my work life, I just sort of piled that on top of all the rest of my work, because in my normal work world, there was an enormous amount of chaos and triage going on within our portfolio, as every company that we're an investor in was trying to figure out what to do. And within a few days, I realized that there was no possible way that I was going to be able to sort of be in all the places and handle all the things. Just the amount of sort of inbound to me was overwhelming. So I started to build some teams on each side very quickly. The IRT team came together very, very fast. This team, and we initially called this organization, I think Erik and Marc remember, we called it ERT at the beginning. I asked Wendy to basically be chief of staff. I didn't really know what sort of title to think about it. And I went out and I started talking to essentially CEOs that I knew, or people that I viewed as CEOs, to get involved. People like Erik, people like Marc, and a few others, to sort of help in different ways. And without a clear agenda, there was no like, here's what our goal is. It's like, I don't really know what this economic council is about yet. I know I'm going to need some help. Let's start engaging, da, 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 da. So that was the origin of this. Within about a week, it was very clear that the Economic Council was going to be a recommendation-oriented set of activities. And that was important and powerful, but it was going to be making recommendations to Jared for executive orders that he could execute, to the legislature, and to be given to the state delegation. And the team that had already spun up, which again, from a leadership perspective, included Erik and Marc and Wendy and Eric Drummond, I think at the very beginning.
Rennie
Fagan, because we were trying to sort of cover all the different pieces of what we were doing. We had a conversation and basically said, look, this council thing is very constrained. And what we're talking about doing, and the vision that was already starting to emerge, was a very big vision for helping businesses under 500 people across all of Colorado. And with that, Energized Colorado was born. And I think March 23rd is the date that we call the start. So remember, March 11th was the beginning of sort of all this. So 2 weeks later, there were a group of us that were founders at the very beginning. There were lots of inbound interest to help on all dimensions. And so, we built a small team already to start to deal with people that were interested in volunteering and figure out where to put them. Wendy agreed to be CEO of the new organization and do a multi-year tour of duty, with the idea that this was a serious thing that would persist. Nobody really had any idea how COVID was going to roll out, but we all knew that it was not going to be something that was going to get solved in 30 days. And like all good startups, it started. My role today is, from the beginning, I tried to treat it the same way I do most things, which is that I am very comfortable helping start things. I am very comfortable being a key part of them, but I don't want to run them. And so if you think about my world as a VC investor, I support CEOs. And as long as I support the CEO, I work for her. And if for some reason I don't support the CEO, it's my job to do something about that, which does not necessarily mean fire her. But each CEO needs something different to be successful. And in the context of this, my mental model was I will do anything I can do to help Wendy be successful as CEO. and to help the rest of my co-founders be successful in getting this thing up and running. And so that's how I started, and that's how I think about my role today.
Awesome, Brad. Thank you very much. So 2 co-founders on the call. Let's go, Marc, first to you, who led our rural efforts. Give us a thumbnail of why you took the call and got excited about it, and your role now, because I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of March, I think all of us were in this weird paralysis of anxious, scared, uncertainty, right? And especially looking at the communities that we serve, asking what can we do to help? And I think those questions emerged into a number of emails. One of those emails came back from Brad saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about pulling this thing together. Will you help get it going?" And when Brad asks something like that, you say yes. So Energized Colorado quickly became a group of people that I knew and trusted or knew of, and quickly became, I'd call it, friends with, of amazing folks with amazing track records, and you know, a lot of focus on community, just aligned focus from day one. It's amazing to be able to come together and essentially start a startup and not have to go through a lot of that, like dancing around figuring out if we're all aligned or not. So that for me was really the answer to what do we do in the middle of this crisis, and it became a group that we helped navigate and quickly build and expand, and found some incredible teams and people that really, you know, have turned this into something incredible and a true feat, and all thanks to you, Wendy, at the helm here now. My role today, I am participating as a board member. I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves again. I had a baby in January. My wife joined a startup here on the Western Slope, and at the same time we were moving home. So I stepped out a little bit from the day-to-day, but I still am engaged here in rural Colorado and stay plugged into a lot of the conversations that are happening around making sure that rural gets represented in all of the broader conversations.
Awesome. Great context for our crowd to understand. Danielle, let's go to you. So I remember sitting in my car talking to you, trying to do Zoom in my car, which was a hot mess. And I was basically recruiting Danielle to help us kind of reorient some of our go-to-market efforts to the minority business segment, and how fortunate we are to have you. So maybe what was it? I know you and Aaron talked first, but give us what triggered you, because you're so busy like everybody else on this panel. Busy, you have like 3 or 4 jobs and you're rolling a bunch of boards. And so what was it that, you know, said, okay, I'll do it, I'll figure it out, I'll reshape my schedule to help?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, good.
Great. Yeah, so I got the call, and this is just such a passion of mine. But the thing that drew me to Energize, because you're right, like not having the time, even though this is such a passion of mine, were a couple of things. The recognition of the long-term work that was going to be needed based on what was happening to our economy in that moment, and intentionality around equity. So I think I had been in discussions in the philanthropic space and the foundation world around equitable recovery. So the systems that helped us build the economy we had before weren't systems of equity. And if we were just going to recreate the will to try to rebuild, we weren't going to be in a place where our minority-owned businesses were going to be able to make it through this. And I hadn't seen an organization come together this fast, but be able to pause and say, and how do we be intentional around equity? How do we be intentional around the businesses who had gotten left behind with PPP funding, and the businesses that had gotten but left behind in everything that had happened up until that point? And I was just like, I have to do it. I have to be involved. And so I am in the minority. I'm leading the minority business segment as a part of the equity segment under Aaron Clark, which is just really important. And there's some deep intentionality on getting this right and making sure that we recover together and that folks don't get left behind. And so that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks for all you're doing on your own with Kevin and with Aaron too. It's going to make a big difference. You're right, on the long haul. This is not a 30-day project. Okay, Erik Mitisek, thumbnail, what caused you to jump in, and what role are you taking now, or serving now, I should say?
Yeah, well, first, it goes without saying, Wendy, the state is so blessed to have you leading this. And there's not a day that goes by that all of us involved look up to your leadership and your generosity, and doing this on your own accord without anything other than a heart for Colorado is sensational. So that has to be said first. The second thing I would say is I was on a flight to San Francisco on March 11th. And I remember landing in San Francisco, getting a call when we hit the ground, and my business partner, who was with me at the time, I said, hey, he just canceled our face-to-face meeting. He decided he was going to close the office and send all of his staff home. And I remember my business partner looking at me and saying, he can't do that. Like, businesses will shut down. We'll close the economy. People cannot send their staff home. And that was on the 11th of March. By the 13th of March, I was packing up my office in Denver. And on the 22nd, I got a call from Brad, really putting his arms around this layered crisis of economic, mental, public health, and soon to hit us racial inequality that was brewing. And I got involved because Colorado has always been a state that's helped itself. When I look back on some of the greatest things that have hit us, whether it be the floods or the Hayman fires, or just these times where Coloradans have been at a point where they just really, really need assistance, Coloradans out and the government has always risen to the occasion. And the government can't do it by themselves. In these circumstances, it takes a lot of passionate Coloradans who believe in their neighbors and their communities and their friends to jump in. And Brad had quickly assembled a thumbprint of a group at the governor's direction to start to do that. And so there's no way that I could say no to A, to Brad Feld, and B, to the mission set of jumping in to help all these entrepreneurs that I love and care for so much. My role today, like Marc, I'm a board member, and I try to be a helper of all things Energized Colorado, and anything I can possibly do to further the organization. Lend a hand to the organization, lend a resource, make an introduction. I try to assist with. My day occupation is helping lead the startups and high growth segment. And so initially, some of the things that came out of the recommendation, Marc Nager's original recommendation around the GAP fund was something that we knew would be really valuable to early stage and high growth companies, as well as the generation and kind of genesis of Energized Colorado, which at the time was more building a resource center to share information between entrepreneurs, which you can see under the community's leadership has blossomed into an incredible portfolio of services, initiatives, and products that serve all four corners of the state. And so, as a passionate native that always believes that Colorado is the laboratory for democracy and how to do things right, this was a project that really showcased the best of Colorado, the best of humanity, lending an arm and a shoulder against a cause that we all needed to immediately battle, at the direction and freedom of the governor's office to really go do something spectacular. And so it's hard to say no to those things when you love Colorado and the startup and small business community so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much for all you've done and you continue to do to support us. So I want to dig into the second part. You've heard a fair bit about, well, a little bit about the organization, a lot about the awesome people that work with us as volunteers, and you also now know more about the origin story through Brad's commentary. I want to go to you, Marc, now, because I think if we go back to the set of crises that Brad often discusses, and now we do too, which is not just one, but now four, and they're interrelated and they're gnarly. Talk a little bit about the role the working team and you as a segment leader in rural Colorado had in listening and making recommendations that ultimately ended up as an initiative called the GAP Fund. I think the audience from a community and ecosystem development would find that very interesting.
Yeah, great question, Wendy. I think one of the most inspiring things to me, especially about rural Colorado, is that just like we assembled on a statewide level, the communities across rural Colorado assembled quickly on a local level. And I've been fortunate enough in my work to have traveled the state and made some incredible relationships over the past few years in rural Colorado. And so when this came together, I immediately knew who to call. I knew who the influencers were. I knew who the people who were already on the ground doing the work. Even if I didn't know what they were doing yet, they were doing it, right? So we essentially got a group of those folks together and called it the rural team. And the most important aspect of that team is they were the ones out there talking directly with small business owners. They were the ones working with their local governments, their county commissioners, their town councils to help navigate some of this stuff. And so we built this kind of very fluid communication loop from the ground up. And I think that ground up worked really quickly. And I remember several conversations with, all of you and the broader team of, hey, we're hearing this trend. Is anybody else hearing that? And then, you'd get a +1 and the confidence and the conviction that we had that, this was truly bottom up information. And these were the problems, the opportunities that were getting identified from the small businesses across the state themselves. I think that was part of the beauty of how this came together. And especially, the communities across rural Colorado, we talk about grit and tenacity and the pioneering spirit, right? And it is those communities, and it totally manifested itself in a really inspiring way. And just the commitment from everybody involved. I think to this day, everybody still has that sense that, we've made great progress and done some great things, but the job's far from over.
And we continue to add to that team, which I love that when I'm out and about on Zoom in different parts of the state to find a human who's very active in the community, who wants to help, but for whatever reason, we're only in month 6, they don't know about us. And so I send them over now to Bonnie Watson, who leads the rural team, and she's doing an amazing job. So Danielle, you should know that the origin story of our operational mojo really started, I kind of got a view of it through rural Colorado because of the nature of the ground game that Marc created and how they listened and learned and made recommendations and would iterate very quickly based on what they heard. And that came to our leadership team. So much of what we do now is modeled after that original organization. And all the same original people are still there, plus new ones. So thanks for that, because I think that explains why, really the Gap Fund initiative, for those of you, you can go on our website and check that out. Someone might want to put the link in chat for me of the Gap Fund, a part of our site. But that recommendation came from the rural team on April 1st. So, and there was a long, complicated, exciting body of work that had to be done. But that's a fair example of what this organization should be doing over the next 4 to 5 years, right? As we listen, learn, iterate, stand up, experiment, et cetera. That's what ecosystem builders do. And Marc's certainly at the top of that heap. Brad, I want to go to you because you love messy startups. You do that for a living. I know not every day you love it, but mostly you love it. So this is my first time, as you know, to really be involved with a messy nonprofit startup with a bunch of volunteers. So I'd love your point of view on this volunteer model that really you have set up, both on the innovation response side, on the public health with the public health crisis, as well on this side. Give some insights to others in the audience who are attempting to do ecosystem development this way, how volunteers play, how they get recruited, any insights you can share.
Well, a lot of the sort of motion around the activity comes from all the work and learning I've done around startup communities over the last decade. And in some ways, the book I wrote in 2012 called Startup Communities laid out a bunch of very simple assertions or principles, which I called the Boulder Thesis, which I think you can abstract and use generally here as well, right? Those 4 principles were the leaders have to be entrepreneurs. So if you think about creating something like this, and you think about the founders, and you think about how people are behaving, and you think about the volunteers, not everybody will self-identify as an entrepreneur, but you've got a critical mass of entrepreneurs in the mix. interestingly, in my new book, and it was one of the mistakes I made in the first book, is I didn't give agency to people who were not entrepreneurs, but who played leadership roles in the startup community. And in the new books, upgrade the second edition, in the new book I wrote, Startup Community Way, I now refer to those people as instigators. So you have leaders and instigators, entrepreneurs and people who aren't entrepreneurs who are playing a leadership role in the startup community. In something like Energized Colorado, you need instigators and you need entrepreneurs as your volunteers. So start with that. Second is that you have to have a long-term view, and from the very beginning of Energized Colorado, one of the reasons I think that we created a separate nonprofit was we knew that the government, the sort of council activity would be temporary. It wasn't something that was going to go on for a long time. And in fact, I think it had a life of about 3 months. It's still active as a council, but we haven't had a meeting in several months. And it's sort of on call in case it's needed. And it's scaled way down just to 7 leaders of those committees, right? Which is, again, totally fine and served its purpose in the context of state government. But I think we wanted collectively, as a set of founders of Energized Colorado, we viewed that, businesses with 500 people or less are going to be struggling for a long time in our state. And we want to build sort of wiring to help them. The third is you have to be inclusive of anyone who wants to engage at any level. And that notion of inclusivity very quickly shifted internally or added internally to this idea that DEI and sort of equity broadly writ should occur across all the activity we did. Very classic first mistake that we made was we created a separate category for women and minority-led business. It's classic, and it's a classic mistake that's not, that's made in the DEI world that, as I now understand from my own learnings, is actually, it's better than not, but it's not actually helpful in a broad sense versus what we've done now with Energized Colorado is integrate equity across everything we do and make that sort of a foundational component of the approach. And then the fourth is you have to have activities and events that engage everybody on a continual basis. And the way we did that with volunteers was not in abnormal ways, right? We created a Slack instance. Most people that were involved, not everybody, but most people that were involved were daily Slack users and were comfortable with it. Lots of email back and forth. Okay, that's easy. That's the least common denominator. We instituted a daily stand-up every day at the very beginning, and then extended those daily stand-ups from just a core leadership team to a bigger group, sort of built a stand-up methodology into the rhythm. And so even though people were volunteers, they had regular and continual connection back to the organization. And frankly, I don't think it would hold together as well without a full-time leader. So the fact that Wendy was willing to commit to be a full-time leader, knowing that A, we were going to make a lot of mistakes, B, we wanted to create an environment where everybody felt included, C, we wanted to create an organization where people didn't feel like they had to stay active forever. That they could be active for a period of time, they could disconnect because they had other stuff to do, and then they could get active again if they wanted to. And look, Marc's a fantastic example of that, where Marc was unbelievably engaged for 2-3 months, and at some point raised his hand. And I don't know how you felt the day you raised your hand and said, because you were one of the first people that was on the founding team that said, look, I got some other shit I got to deal with in my life.
I know. And I went, no.
Well, you might have gotten there inside your head. But Marc, I don't know if you remember my first comment to you, but my first comment was awesome. Like, this is the behavior we want to model, is that you're not trapped in this volunteer activity. This is a volunteer activity. And once you say, hey, I got other priorities right now, it doesn't mean you're gone. It means, hey, you're still involved, but just lurk. Hang out. And when something pops up that you want to re-engage with, re-engage. And when something pops up that you want to do. And if you all of a sudden see a problem that you want solved, you're still part of this thing. So like those things were built into the fabric, and probably many others that I don't remember. But it was that kind of approach, which for anybody that's done startup community development or ecosystem development or involved in any of the various activities in the Front Range or throughout Colorado in startup community work, you'll recognize that many of those principles are the same.
Yeah.
I think one of the things just to add in there, because this is part of the startup community, you talk about passing the baton. Some people feel locked into what they're doing. And I was very fortunate to have Bonnie Watson, who you mentioned, on the team. And arguably absolutely replaced my role with somebody better than me. So I think that's always something you're trying to do in community work is pass the baton to somebody who's even more qualified for that work than you are.
Yeah. I think we're just very agile that way. You know, people declare, they come in, they take a role, an active role, they stay as long as they can, to Brad's point. And then, you know, if they need to step back or even step out for a while and come back in, that's all fine. We still maintain our community spirit. Yes, Energized Colorado community across the state. So I'm mindful of time in the last phase. And those of you that don't know a lot about the specific programs we serve, please go to our website. It's very well done. Thanks to Erik and others on our volunteer team. I'm very proud of our website. I think it's easy to consume, it's easy to navigate, and you can check more of the programs there. I just wanted the audience to get a sense, right, of how we orient and why we're doing what we're doing, and a little bit of the how. So I want to go to the last phase of the conversation, which really gets into the thick of why I think Danielle agreed to lean in. And it's one of the things, I mean, I am ultimately very, very curious. I'm a student of any game I'm asked to be a part of. And I've had a lot to learn, as Brad knows, about the local business economy. You know, I have always been a part of startup communities, but learning how the local small business economy intersects with all the other nodes in the ecosystem has been very fascinating to me. So I want to give you, as we go into this part of the section, just a few data points, okay? Because I think that's fair, because it really says what we're dealing with in our state. Number one, there are about, give or take, according to the Secretary of State of Colorado, about 600,000 small businesses across the state. 119 of those, according to that data, Secretary of State data, 120,000 of those businesses have fewer than 20 employees. Okay, so those are 2 mile markers for our work. Colorado, we have 1.1 million employees in that small business sector, that sector I just described, 600,000 businesses, which is 48% of the state's workforce, right? That is significant. That is far different than what I have been around in other states. It's very, very unique in terms of this small business economy. The dollars spent, get this, the dollars spent at locally owned businesses have 3 times the direct economic impact on the community as non-local businesses. So when we go through a set of crises like we've gone through, and we have to shut down, at least for a period of time, you know, there's a lot to consider. And I always imagined, although I didn't know this for sure, and I'm going to go to you, I'm going to go to Erik with this, to you with this question. You know, I always imagined that I didn't see this as a reboot effort. And it's not because I was savvy about the details of our economy. I just sensed that it was fragile for lots of reasons that I started understanding better over time, and that we would have to reshape, reimagine, or whatever those words were, that we wouldn't want it to be exactly as it was, right? That we need to do some new things, that we need to innovate. And so I want to, Erik, go to you, because you're a word guy, you're a big thinker. When you think of a resilient economy, what comes to mind, especially around the small business sector of Colorado? How would you characterize that so we can know as we're getting there? How would you describe it to us?
Yeah, when I think of a resilient economy, I think of an economy that, you know, from a small business perspective, has the resources available to respond to the current activities at hand. So, you know, small business in nature, they're fragile, especially companies that are less than 20 employees. And so, to be able to have the resources and ability to respond to things like we're going through and quickly, be able to shift into something else. When you look at the restaurant economy, you've seen a lot of restaurants, there's kind of different types of restaurants that recovery. And you look at that, and some of them immediately shifted 100% of their delivery to delivery service or to take out and take away. Some of them did hybrid things for the offices that were still convening downtown, trying to really engage with the individual entrepreneurs and companies to have an impact on business at hand. When I think about resilience, I think it's about creating those equitable opportunities to provide resources that allow entrepreneurs to really respond to the activities at hand, to really take advantage of market opportunities quickly and really collaborate and work with one another to bring the entire workforce and the entire economy into the discussion. And I think Energize, Colorado, especially when you look at some of the things like Make for COVID, or you look at things like the PPE store, the resiliency around being able to quickly stand up those things and build new businesses in the wake of loss of businesses becomes incredibly important. And one of Colorado's biggest benefits is that we have a really, really diverse economy. When we went through the downturn in 2009 and 2010, Colorado survived and waged much better than a lot of the other economies because it had exposure to technology, it had exposure to oil and gas, it had exposure to tourism, it had exposure to aerospace. And that deep diversity provides a lot of balance that allows workforces to shift and to engage in different economies that may be prospering when others might be suffering. And so I think when I think about that resiliency, I think it's a combination of resources and programs that support workforce nimbleness, but most importantly, being able to build an economy that includes all types of workers and all types of workforces that can quickly engage in different industries when necessary.
Thank you. Well said. And so as we express ourselves around imagining this resilient economy, we Energize Colorado, we on this panel have a responsibility to think about programs, projects, initiatives we can build to help local businesses be that, right? Be more resilient, whether it be through looking at their business model as you described, or using digital tools, or being more digital ready, more sensitive to that kind of competency. So there's a lot of work we can do still long term to help with resilience, and that's how we have to look at it. So Danielle, one of the things I want to talk to you and Brad about in specific, because Brad's been so involved with this, is just building an equitable economy. It's easy to talk about abstractly, because it is right and it sounds right, but actually making that happen, like this new economy this next economy that we're building, how do we ensure, what do we do to ensure that when this economy is rebuilt, it is equitable? Share your thoughts and ideas. And we're working on the GAP fund, but that's a source of capital, and it's one thing, very focused on underrepresented communities, and we're proud of that. But I'm sure you have many other ideas of what we could do.
I have a zillion ideas and not enough time, but I will, I'll try to summarize the way I think about this. The first thing that you have to do in order to build an equitable economy is to acknowledge where it was not equitable before. And so I think that's been the most important thing, that with everything we're trying to do in Energize Colorado, we're saying, where was it not equitable before? Where do I not have, the revenues that can get me access to certain capitals? If small businesses are fragile, minority owned and women owned businesses are the word that is worse than fragile, right? And that's what we're seeing with the way that COVID has impacted these companies, rural businesses, the same thing, which are often minority owned in the state of Colorado. So those things connect. And so you have to say, where was it broken to start with in our economy? And I think the same way we are calling small business fragile, it's like, at the same time, like with great risk comes great reward, which is why small businesses is so important and why our economy has been what it has been in the last 10 years is because I think the investment in small business has created great reward. And I think the reason it does is because with small businesses, you don't really know where business ends and community starts. It's this one
Well
thing.
said.
It's this one thing that moves together because the business owners live in the communities where they have their businesses. My friends live in the, in the community where they have their businesses. I patron my friends' businesses and they patron mine, right? So it's not just community, it's family, and it's not just business, it's community. And I think whenever you have that combination, your ability to bounce back, your ability to see big reward in your economy is really important. And that's how we create equity, because like Brad was saying, it's like outside of the startup community, we describe those principles as a community organizing model. And what you do is you go, you listen to residents, you quickly react to the issues that they've identified, and you provide resources. And that's what Energized Colorado is doing for small business right now. And the way to create equity is to listen to the people who are affected. And I don't think enough has come to the surface since March, where we're listening to the people that are affected. We're moving in a way that the same folks who had a hard time getting there to start with are getting left behind. And so I was happy to see Energized Colorado be an organization that's listening, that's responding. When we do see something that's not exactly the way we want it, we fix it. So that's the beauty of it being like a startup, as well as being in this organizing model of volunteers. That's the same. And I think that's how we're going to do it, is to listen, and then to create intentional and directed resources and to be unapologetic about it. So we need to be unapologetic when we say we're directing resources to women-led businesses, we're directing resources to BIPOC businesses, because they will experience this differently than other businesses. And so we have to be as intentional about that as we are with anything. And that's how you create equity, is to sort of say, it's not fairness, it's not equality, it's equity. Meaning I might have to give more, I might have to be more focused, I might have to be more intentional in order to make sure that we all come back from this in a way that is not just what we were before, because it is a beautiful economy. I love the way Erik talks about Colorado. I really agree. But even better than that, and that we continue to see communities and businesses be this really tight organism that was running our economy, and in a way that is equitable. And I think we're there. I think we're getting intentional and focused and learning from our mistakes, and I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm proud of it too. I still feel, just to be honest and open about it, I feel overwhelmed some days about so much that we need to be doing, and in this particular area of being equitable, and help us, stay on point with that. I want to go quickly also, Danielle, to Brad, because he really helped us working with Aaron. A lot of work got done for us inside Energized Colorado to get our act together. We could talk about being an intentional. I'm not sure we were in the very beginning, right? I mean, we wanted to be, but there was so much going on. It was just hard. And then we got very fortunate to engage with Aaron, and then Brad helped all of us really amplify our intentionality, if I could use all those buzzwords. Brad, what would you add that you've seen us, Energize Colorado, evolve and learn over the last, we've only been doing this 5 months, in a couple of weeks, but I think there have been some milestones, and I don't think it was just Black Lives Matter. I think it was an overall awareness that we started activating. So talk about your perspective, and you and I haven't really spoken about this, but I'd be curious.
Well, I think there's multiple layers to it, right? The first is the idea that you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you have to be okay with making a lot of mistakes. Yeah. And when you make a mistake in the context of any of the conversations, it's true in entrepreneurship broadly, but especially in the context of the discussion on equity, when you make a mistake, to listen and to learn from the mistake and to own the mistake, not to be defensive, not to be deflective, not to try to justify why you made the mistake. And, a friend of mine who is a black male about my age, somebody I've known for a while, in a context, a conversation we were having about being uncomfortable and me being uncomfortable in a particular part of the conversation, he said, basically in a very friendly but blunt way, I'm uncomfortable every day of my life. Like, get used to the idea that you're going to be uncomfortable for a while here. It's the way it is. And that was profound to me. It's like, I'm uncomfortable in lots of different places. I do lots of things that are hard. I make lots of mistakes. I have lots of things fail. I have some things succeed. And, I've learned as I've gotten older how to process that in a way that's constructive and helpful. And all of a sudden I'm like, yep, this is an area that I'm going to be uncomfortable every day. I'm going to make mistakes every day. And I think that sort of the evolution of that versus trying to, and it's a thing we see in our society regularly, I use the word deflect, or you shift, or you try to self-justify. Not helpful. Doesn't matter. And the idea that listening and learning and participating, and whatever language you want to use, whether you want to use language as an ally or an accomplice, sort of the idea that you're a participant, an active participant, not a passive participant in equity, is important. And you can be an active participant in a good way or an active participant in a bad way. But it's kind of not relevant if you're passive. That's right. And if you're trying to be active in a good way, you're going to make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, sort of iterate. So that was like part of the conversation, especially early on when we made some mistakes.
Yeah.
And I would call it Aaron Clark as somebody who's been incredibly helpful to us early and to me personally, just in terms of talking through and being willing to invest, talking through those moments, where you're like, it'd be easy to say, fuck it. Or, not my problem. Or that's not me, that's you. Like, actually, take the layer off and go the next layer down. And I'd sort of end with that. Like, I think that's the most powerful thing. And, in the context of Energized Colorado, I like to say a thing about startup communities. I'll map it to Energized Colorado and I'll map it to this. In the context of Energized Colorado, or startup communities, startup community has one goal, and that's to help entrepreneurs succeed. That's the one goal. In the context of Energized Colorado, our one goal is to help businesses with less than 500 people in the state of Colorado navigate the COVID crisis and emerge stronger from it.
That's right.
Like, when you stop getting tangled up in like all the other stuff, it's like, that's your goal. Like, of course there's going to be lots of difficult moments in all dimensions of that. So just do your best. That's and right. Acknowledge to everybody else they're doing their best.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole, do your best. That's how I have to start every day. Otherwise, there can be a slippery slope of expectation in my own head. I want to end, and we have 6 minutes. I want to wrap quickly, and I'm going to go to Marc and Erik, who are co-founders, who do serve on our board, just to get a point of view. We're in this unique opportunity where we have a nonprofit sector, we have digital entrepreneurs, we have local small business, we have the contingent workforce. In my mind, I'd love to better understand how you guys see the interrelationship of those segments, those broad segments, how they come together to lift and shift the economy of Colorado, right? Because I see that we operate in silos, and I see they do sometimes as well. So Marc, talk about the interrelationship between rural Colorado, local business, rural Colorado, entrepreneurs, yes, and nonprofits. How do you see that coming together?
It's a challenge, right? And some of these, I think, are horizontals, not verticals. We have to organize, and I think this is like a lot of organizations go through this. Just as humans, we need structure to be able to communicate effectively. And even as an organization and a volunteer-led organization at that, we organized around some of the verticals. And I think we quickly learned that, small business, high growth business, all of the DEI efforts, right? Those are horizontals. Those go across all different aspects. And so I think how they come together, and I've seen it play out really beautifully on the rural team and the small business team and Erik's team, but making sure each one of those voices are represented in those verticals, right? And making sure that you have individuals within each of those groups that know that they're carrying that torch.
Yeah.
And there's a common set of vocabulary and tools that they all have access to as well. And I think I've seen it come together in this organization. It's something I wish I would have had as a skill in an organizing structure in other organizations, but something I've been working with a number of other companies to implement as well. So I think it's been powerful to watch how this group came together and evolved, back to Brad's point of, being open and listening and learning.
Thanks, Mark. So Erik, last question for you. You were so helpful to us and specifically to me to think through our offerings, right, versus our segments, and like what offerings could we start with that would be foundational to building out our long-term capability. And that was mental health and mentorship and reopening. And then of course the gap fund. You encouraged that because you knew we needed foundational, products, if you will, services. So talk a little bit about how you see that evolving and the impact you think we've had with those services, those foundational services in this first phase across both entrepreneurs, nonprofits, and small. Because if we can deliver those to all of those segments horizontally, as Mark said, we'll be able to lift this economy. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Energized Colorado, I think at the community's leadership across the segment leads and just listening to the community, we've started to come up with a really good platform of initiatives that have started to really drive value, in those individual areas. Whether it's the mental health initiative, whether it's the mentorship program and business resource initiative, or most recently the Gap Fund, all companies have in common two things: talent and capital. And talent gets impacted in a variety of ways. It gets impacted, with mental health issues. It gets impacted with, reduction in force, increase in force, all the aspects around just navigating talent. And I think our ability to provide resources across all sectors, the private sector, nonprofit sector, public sector, to engage in those things and put people to work in meaningful occupational roles is critical. Things will change. The value we can create is to listen to where those opportunities are across pockets of different economies and redirect and repurpose incredible individuals across our economy. I think that's one place we can really do impactful work. I think the most important thing going forward is just to listen. This crisis will change. Things will come up that will be new. There will be problems that will emerge that will be linear, and some of them will be, across the individual economies or groups. And it just becomes paramount for us to be in tune with that, which is why I think, Mark had built kind of an exemplar group of a broad footprint across a lot of different markets in rural that all started to bubble up things into, a unique feedback loop that provided feedback on the initiatives as well as the needs of rural. And so I think keeping that ethos of Coloradans helping Coloradans, keeping our head down to listen more than we do, and making sure that we are thinking about all parts of the economy and all parts of the workforce as we do our work, I think that's going to give us the best opportunity to really make all of Colorado rise.
Yeah, thanks very much. So we're right at the top of the hour. I want to end with how clear it is for us, Energized Colorado, statewide, volunteer-led, to focus on a small business, helping them navigate. I'm using a verb that Brad used, helping them to navigate, regroup, and then grow. And that's how I think every morning and every night and all day long. And so thank you all in the audience for signing up for this particular panel. Thanks for being active in our chat. Special shout out to Lupe and Barbara for always being there with us, supporting Energized Colorado in so many ways. We're very grateful to both of you and your Second Act Women organization. You've been an amazing partner, and I'm sure we're just getting started with that partnership. So thank you guys for investing an hour on behalf of Denver Startup Week. And with that, I say goodbye because I got another panel to do. Okay, love you all. Energize Colorado.